In the shadow-draped chambers of Renaissance Florence, where whispered conspiracies could elevate a merchant to nobility or reduce a prince to ash, Niccolò Machiavelli observed a fundamental truth that would echo through centuries: power is not merely accumulated, it is cultivated through the delicate art of alliance. The man who understood this principle, who could weave himself into the fabric of influential networks while simultaneously destroying his own weaknesses, would become truly indestructible. The first principle that emerged from Machiavelli's keen observations was deceptively simple yet profoundly complex: never approach a potential ally from a position of desperate need. Those who came before the powerful with empty hands and pleading eyes invariably found themselves dismissed or exploited. Instead, the wise aspirant understood that every interaction must be framed as an exchange of value, never a request for charity. Consider the young Lorenzo de' Medici, who understood this principle instinctively. When seeking the support of the papal court, he did not present himself as a supplicant requiring financial backing. Instead, he arrived with detailed intelligence about Ottoman troop movements, rare manuscripts that would enhance the Vatican's library, and a proposal for a trade route that would benefit both Florence and Rome. His request for support was positioned as an opportunity he was graciously extending to the Pope. This reframing transformed him from a beggar into a benefactor, from a liability into an asset. The second principle builds upon this foundation: master the art of making others feel intellectually superior while subtly guiding them toward your desired conclusion. The human ego, particularly among the powerful, craves validation of its intelligence and insight. The skilled alliance builder learns to feed this hunger while directing the conversation toward their objectives. This technique requires extraordinary self-control, the destruction of one's own need for recognition and credit. The weak self desperately wants to be acknowledged as the smartest person in the room. The transformed individual understands that being perceived as slightly less brilliant than one's target often opens doors that obvious intelligence would keep firmly locked. When Francesco Sforza sought the support of Venice's Council of Ten, he presented his military strategies not as his own innovations, but as logical conclusions that the wise Venetians would naturally reach given certain information he happened to possess. By the end of their deliberations, the council believed they had conceived the entire campaign themselves, making them far more committed to its success than if Sforza had claimed authorship. The third principle delves into the psychology of reciprocity: create situations where powerful individuals feel they have discovered your worth independently. Direct self-promotion triggers suspicion and resistance. However, when influential people believe they have uncovered hidden value through their own perceptiveness, they develop a sense of ownership over your success that can be more valuable than any contract or formal agreement. This principle requires careful orchestration. One must position evidence of competence and value where it will be discovered by the right people at the right moment. The banking houses of Renaissance Italy perfected this technique, leaving carefully crafted financial documents where competitors' agents would find them, documents that revealed selective truths about their capabilities and resources. When rival banks believed they had gained secret intelligence about these capabilities, they often approached with partnership proposals that the original banks had hoped to inspire. The fourth principle addresses the crucial element of timing: never make your move during another's moment of triumph or crisis. Both extreme emotional states cloud judgment and make people defensive about their position. The wise alliance seeker waits for the quiet moments between peaks and valleys, when potential allies have the mental space to consider new relationships and the emotional equilibrium to evaluate them rationally. The Duke of Milan learned this lesson through painful experience. His initial attempts to court the French court occurred immediately after their victory at the Battle of Cerignola, when the French were drunk on success and suspicious of any Italians seeking to attach themselves to their triumph. His overtures were rebuffed with insulting dismissiveness. However, when he approached them months later, during a period of routine administration when the glow of victory had faded but no new crises demanded their attention, the same French nobles who had spurned him welcomed his diplomatic advances with serious consideration. The fifth principle reveals perhaps the most counterintuitive aspect of alliance building: demonstrate strength through restraint rather than aggression. The powerful are constantly surrounded by those who seek to impress through displays of force, wealth, or influence. Such demonstrations are so common they become background noise. True strength reveals itself through the ability to withhold these displays when they would be expected or appreciated. This principle strikes at the heart of ego destruction. The weak self constantly needs to prove its worth through external validation. The strong self knows its worth and feels no compulsion to broadcast it. When Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia, later Pope Alexander VI, was ascending through church hierarchy, he could have leveraged his family's wealth and connections to secure rapid promotions. Instead, he deliberately chose assignments in remote monasteries and politically insignificant dioceses, focusing on administrative excellence and theological scholarship. This restraint puzzled his contemporaries but ultimately impressed the papal court far more than any display of influence could have achieved. When he finally did seek advancement, his reputation for choosing substance over spectacle made him appear uniquely worthy of trust. The sixth principle requires understanding the deeper motivations that drive powerful individuals, appeal to their vision of legacy rather than their immediate desires. Most people in positions of power have already secured their basic needs and immediate wants. What they truly crave is the assurance that their actions will be remembered positively by history. The skilled alliance builder learns to position their proposals as contributions to this lasting legacy. This approach demands extensive research into the target's background, stated values, and public commitments. One must understand not just what they want to achieve, but how they want to be remembered. The Venetian merchant families excelled at this technique when seeking partnerships with foreign kingdoms. Rather than focusing on immediate commercial benefits, they presented trade agreements as cultural exchange programs that would spread Renaissance art and ideas throughout Europe, securing the sponsoring ruler's place in history as a patron of civilization's advance. Kings who might have balked at complex commercial negotiations embraced these same arrangements when they were framed as humanitarian and cultural legacies. The seventh principle addresses the management of perceived equality. Position yourself as a peer, not a subordinate, regardless of actual power differentials. Powerful people prefer to associate with other powerful people, even when the power differential is significant. The alliance seeker must project an aura of confidence and competence that suggests they belong in elite circles, while remaining careful not to challenge or threaten their target's position. This delicate balance requires careful attention to social signals and cultural codes. One must dress, speak, and carry oneself in ways that communicate membership in the elite class without appearing to compete for position within it. The key lies in projecting horizontal rather than vertical ambition, the desire to expand influence in new directions rather than climb existing hierarchies. When young Cesare Borgia sought alliances with established military leaders, he presented himself not as an ambitious upstart seeking to join their ranks, but as the representative of a new power center that could complement their existing influence. This positioning made him an attractive partner rather than a threatening competitor. The eighth principle recognizes the importance of intellectual compatibility. Share knowledge generously, but ensure it demonstrates your unique value rather than making you replaceable. Information is one of the most powerful currencies in elite circles, but it must be shared strategically. The goal is to become known as a valuable source of insights while maintaining the perception that one's perspective is irreplaceable. This requires developing genuine expertise in areas that matter to your target audience while cultivating a unique analytical framework that cannot be easily replicated. The intelligence networks of Renaissance city-states understood this principle intuitively. They shared information freely with their allies, but the raw data was always accompanied by analysis that reflected their particular geographic position, cultural understanding, and network of contacts. Recipients valued both the information and the interpretation, creating dependency that went beyond simple data exchange. The ninth principle acknowledges the role of emotional intelligence. Learn to read and respond to the unspoken concerns of powerful individuals. Those in positions of authority often cannot express their deepest fears and insecurities directly, as doing so would undermine their position. The skilled alliance builder develops the ability to perceive these hidden anxieties and address them indirectly through their proposals and interactions. This skill requires careful observation of behavioral patterns, speaking choices, and decision-making tendencies. A ruler who consistently delays major decisions may be struggling with analysis paralysis, requiring a partner who can provide clear recommendations with detailed supporting evidence. A business leader who frequently changes course might be dealing with imposter syndrome, needing allies who reinforce their expertise and judgment. By addressing these underlying needs without directly acknowledging them, one can provide psychological value that transcends any specific business proposal. The 10th principle involves the strategic use of vulnerability. Reveal carefully chosen weaknesses that make you more human without undermining your competence. Perfect facades create suspicion and distance among the powerful, who know from experience that everyone has flaws and limitations. By controlling which imperfections become visible, one can create the illusion of transparency and authenticity while protecting truly damaging information. The vulnerabilities revealed should be relatable to the target audience and preferably connected to positive qualities. A leader might admit to working too hard because of passion for their mission, or to being overly loyal to team members even when it creates short-term difficulties. These weaknesses actually reinforce positive impressions while creating emotional connection. The key is ensuring that the revealed flaws are ones that powerful people share, creating a sense of kinship and understanding. Part 2, the architecture of influence and the dismantling of weakness. The 11th principle represents perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of Machiavellian alliance building. Create situations where your success directly contributes to your allies' success, making your failure costly to them. This goes beyond simple mutual benefit to establish deep structural interdependence that makes betrayal or abandonment economically and politically irrational. This principle requires long-term strategic thinking and the ability to architect complex systems of mutual dependency. The Medici banking empire exemplified this approach by creating financial instruments that tied the success of their business directly to the prosperity of their clients. Rather than simply lending money, they developed profit-sharing arrangements, joint ventures, and investment partnerships that meant their allies' wealth grew in direct proportion to Medici's success. When competitors attempted to undermine the Medici, they found themselves opposed not just by the banking family itself, but by a network of partners whose own interests were threatened by any disruption to Medici operations. The implementation of this principle often requires sacrificing short-term gains for long-term security. One might choose to share profits more generously than strictly necessary, or provide services at reduced margins, in order to create the deep dependency that ensures lasting partnership. The weak self rebels against this approach, wanting immediate maximum return on every transaction. The strong self understands that moderate returns from secure relationships vastly outweigh maximum returns from fragile arrangements. Consider the approach taken by the Venetian arsenal in securing military contracts. Rather than simply building ships for foreign navies, they established training programs for foreign naval officers, created ongoing maintenance contracts, and developed supply relationships for specialized materials. Their clients became dependent not just on Venetian shipbuilding, but on Venetian expertise, Venetian parts, and Venetian strategic guidance. This created switching costs so high that even when competitors offered lower prices, clients found it economically irrational to change suppliers. The 12th principle addresses the psychological dimension of long-term relationship management. Regularly reaffirm your value through subtle demonstration rather than explicit reminder. The human mind tends to forget past benefits over time, a phenomenon that can gradually erode even strong alliances. The skilled alliance manager develops systems for keeping their value visible without appearing to seek credit or recognition. This requires creativity and subtlety. Direct reminders of past assistance often backfire by making the recipient feel pressured or manipulated. Instead, effective practitioners find ways to recreate successful patterns from their previous interactions, allowing allies to experience again the benefits of the partnership without feeling that past favors are being leveraged against them. The intelligence networks of the period perfected this technique through their reporting systems. Rather than simply providing information when requested, they established regular briefing schedules that became integral to their allies' decision-making processes. Each briefing included updates on previous intelligence that had proven accurate or valuable, not as explicit reminders of their worth, but as natural follow-up on ongoing situations. This kept their value constantly visible while appearing to provide pure service rather than seeking recognition. The 13th and final principle synthesizes all others into a comprehensive approach to alliance building. Become indispensable by solving problems your allies didn't know they had. Most alliance seekers focus on addressing known, articulated needs. This approach faces inevitable competition from others offering similar solutions. True indispensability comes from developing such deep understanding of your allies' situations that you can identify and address emerging problems before they become critical. This requires extraordinary analytical capability and intimate knowledge of your allies' operations, markets, and challenges. One must become a strategic advisor rather than a simple service provider, anticipating future difficulties and positioning solutions before crises develop. This level of insight cannot be faked or rushed. It demands genuine intellectual investment in understanding complex systems and their failure modes. The transformation required to implement these principles successfully represents a complete reconstruction of the self. The weak individual approaches alliance building from a position of need, desperation, and ego-driven desire for recognition. Every interaction is tainted by these underlying motivations, making genuine partnership impossible. The strong individual has systematically eliminated these sources of weakness, creating space for authentic strategic relationships. This destruction of weakness must be comprehensive and ongoing. It begins with the recognition that traditional sources of self-worth, recognition, credit, immediate gratification, are actually obstacles to real power and security. The process of elimination requires developing new sources of satisfaction, the quiet pride of successful influence, the deep security of mutual dependency, the intellectual pleasure of complex strategic success. The weak self constantly seeks validation from others, making it impossible to provide the kind of psychological support that powerful allies require. The strong self draws validation from internal sources, the successful completion of complex strategies, the achievement of long-term objectives, the development of deep competencies, freeing it to focus entirely on the needs and concerns of alliance targets. Financial anxiety represents another critical weakness that must be addressed. Those who approach alliances from positions of financial desperation inevitably communicate their need through subtle behavioral cues that undermine their negotiating position. True alliance builders ensure their basic security before engaging in partnership discussions, allowing them to negotiate from genuine strength rather than manufactured confidence. The need for intellectual credit poses perhaps the most subtle but devastating weakness. The desire to be recognized as the architect of successful strategies often leads to behaviors that threaten potential allies' sense of agency and competence. The transformed individual finds satisfaction in the success itself, regardless of public attribution, making them far more attractive as partners to those who require maintaining their own public image of competence and leadership. Social status anxiety similarly undermines effective alliance building. Those who are insecure about their position in social hierarchies often overcompensate through displays of wealth, knowledge, or connections that create distance rather than rapport with their targets. The strong individual is comfortable with their position and focuses entirely on creating value for others rather than proving their own worth. The process of weakness elimination requires brutal self-honesty about one's motivations, fears, and insecurities. Many people believe they have overcome these limitations when they have simply learned to hide them more effectively. True transformation requires acknowledging these weaknesses completely, understanding their root causes, and systematically replacing them with healthier sources of motivation and satisfaction. This transformation cannot be rushed or faked. Powerful individuals are expert at detecting insincerity and hidden agendas, having spent years protecting themselves from manipulation and exploitation. Any attempt to implement Machiavellian alliance-building techniques without genuine personal transformation will be quickly detected and rejected. The techniques work only when they flow from authentic strength and genuine concern for mutual benefit. The development of this authentic strength requires extensive practice in low-stakes situations. One cannot begin this process by attempting to form alliances with the most powerful individuals in one's field. Instead, the wise practitioner develops their skills through interactions with peers and slightly more influential individuals, gradually building the competencies and confidence necessary for more ambitious alliance-building efforts. Part 3: The Eternal Vigilance of Power and the Continuous Creation of Strength. The maintenance of powerful alliances requires understanding that relationships among the influential are fundamentally different from ordinary social connections. These relationships exist within environments of constant change, where today's ally might become tomorrow's competitor, where external pressures regularly test the strength of partnerships, and where the value of any alliance must be continuously demonstrated and renewed. The sophisticated alliance builder recognizes that their work is never complete. Each successful relationship requires ongoing attention, strategic evolution, and periodic renewal of value proposition. This demands developing systems for monitoring the changing needs and circumstances of allies, anticipating threats to existing relationships, and positioning oneself to provide new forms of value as situations evolve. The intelligence networks that surrounded Renaissance power centers understood this principle intuitively. They established formal processes for regularly reassessing the political landscape, tracking changes in their allies' positions and priorities, and identifying emerging opportunities for increased cooperation. These assessments informed continuous strategic adjustments that kept their relationships relevant and valuable despite constantly shifting circumstances. Modern practitioners must develop similar systematic approaches to relationship management. This begins with understanding that powerful individuals' needs and circumstances change rapidly. Economic conditions evolve, political situations shift, competitive landscapes transform, and personal priorities develop. The alliance builder who remains focused on outdated assumptions about their partner's needs will quickly find their relationships becoming irrelevant. The process requires developing multiple channels of information about allies' changing situations. Direct communication provides some insight, but powerful individuals often cannot or will not share their most pressing concerns openly. Independent research, network intelligence, and careful observation of behavioral changes provide crucial supplementary information for understanding evolving needs. Consider the challenge faced by merchant families when their royal allies' political situations changed due to succession, war, or economic crisis. Those who had built relationships solely around specific trade agreements or financial arrangements often found themselves abandoned when new priorities emerged. However, merchants who had developed deeper understanding of their allies' strategic objectives could quickly identify new ways to provide value under changed circumstances. The Fugger banking dynasty exemplified this adaptive approach. When their primary alliance with the Habsburg emperors faced challenges due to religious conflicts and territorial disputes, they had already begun developing relationships with emerging Protestant powers and exploring trade opportunities in the New World. Their allies' changing circumstances became opportunities to provide new forms of financial and logistical support rather than threats to existing relationships. This adaptability requires maintaining what might be called strategic optionality, the ability to provide multiple forms of value across different scenarios. The alliance builder who can only offer one type of service or expertise faces inevitable obsolescence as circumstances change. Developing broad competencies and diverse networks ensures that one always has relevant value to offer, regardless of how situations evolve. The development of strategic optionality demands significant intellectual and practical investment. One must become genuinely knowledgeable about multiple domains that might become relevant to allies' needs: finance, technology, politics, culture, international affairs, and specific industry dynamics. This knowledge cannot be superficial. Powerful people quickly detect and dismiss dilettante expertise. Instead, one must develop sufficient depth in multiple areas to provide genuine insight and practical assistance. The psychological demands of maintaining elite alliances represent perhaps the greatest challenge for most individuals. The constant vigilance required to monitor changing needs, the ongoing pressure to demonstrate value, and the knowledge that relationships can be terminated for reasons beyond one's control create significant stress for those unaccustomed to operating in these environments. The weak self finds this pressure overwhelming and often responds with desperate behaviors that actually accelerate relationship deterioration. Attempts to lock partners into exclusive arrangements, excessive demands for reassurance about relationship security, or increasingly aggressive promotion of one's value all signal weakness and insecurity that make abandonment more likely. The strong self approaches these challenges as interesting intellectual puzzles rather than existential threats. Each change in circumstances becomes an opportunity to demonstrate adaptability and strategic thinking. Each successful navigation of relationship challenges provides evidence of competence and reliability that strengthens future security. This psychological transformation requires developing genuine satisfaction from the process of strategic relationship management itself, rather than depending entirely on outcomes for emotional fulfillment. The alliance builder must find intellectual pleasure in understanding complex political and economic systems, personal satisfaction in developing valuable competencies, and social enjoyment in sophisticated professional relationships. The cultivation of this mindset requires extensive practice in lower-stakes environments. One cannot develop the psychological resilience necessary for elite alliance management by jumping immediately into high-pressure relationships with the most powerful individuals available. Instead, the wise practitioner gradually increases the complexity and stakes of their relationship-building efforts, building confidence and competence through progressive challenges. The temporal dimension of alliance management presents unique challenges that distinguish it from ordinary business or social relationships. Elite alliances often involve very long time horizons, with initial investments in relationship building potentially not yielding significant returns for years. Simultaneously, the pace of change in elite environments means that strategies must be continuously adapted to maintain relevance. This paradox requires developing what might be called patient urgency, the ability to invest steadily in long-term relationship development while remaining responsive to immediate opportunities and threats. The successful alliance builder maintains consistent, ongoing efforts to provide value and strengthen connections while staying alert to moments when more intensive engagement might yield breakthrough results. The Medici approach to papal relationships illustrates this balance perfectly. They maintained consistent, low-level engagement with church hierarchy across decades, providing financial services, cultural patronage, and political intelligence regardless of immediate returns. However, when papal elections or major church policy decisions created opportunities for increased influence, they were prepared to make substantial immediate investments in relationship development and influence. This approach requires significant resource discipline. The temptation to either underinvest in relationships that show slow initial development or overinvest in response to immediate opportunities can undermine long-term strategic objectives. Successful practitioners develop systematic approaches to resource allocation that ensure steady relationship maintenance while preserving capacity for strategic intensification when circumstances warrant. The geographic dimension of elite alliance building has become increasingly complex in contemporary environments. Traditional power structures were often geographically concentrated, making relationship management more straightforward from a logistical perspective. Modern power networks span continents and cultures, requiring alliance builders to develop competencies in cross-cultural communication, international travel, and remote relationship management. This geographic complexity also creates opportunities for unique value creation. Those who can effectively bridge different cultural and geographic power centers often become invaluable intermediaries for partners who lack such capabilities. The development of genuinely multicultural competence, not just language skills, but deep understanding of different cultural approaches to business, politics, and social relationships, represents an increasingly valuable form of strategic differentiation. The technological dimension adds another layer of complexity to modern alliance management. Digital communications create possibilities for more frequent and immediate contact with allies, but they also create expectations for constant availability and rapid response that can be overwhelming. The sophisticated alliance builder must develop digital communication strategies that enhance rather than complicate relationship management. This includes understanding how different types of communication affect relationship dynamics. Personal meetings create emotional bonds and enable complex negotiation that digital communications cannot replicate. However, regular digital contact maintains awareness and demonstrates ongoing attention that infrequent personal meetings cannot provide. The effective alliance builder uses each communication medium for its optimal purposes rather than treating them as interchangeable. The culmination of sophisticated alliance management is the development of what might be called network effects within one's relationship portfolio. Individual alliances become mutually reinforcing when managed skillfully, with each relationship providing value that enhances other relationships. This creates geometric rather than linear returns on relationship investment and provides security that transcends any individual alliance. The creation of network effects requires careful attention to the compatibility and complementarity of different allies. Each new relationship should ideally strengthen existing relationships rather than creating conflicts or competing demands. This sometimes means foregoing attractive individual opportunities in favor of maintaining network coherence and mutual reinforcement. The Venetian approach to international alliance management demonstrated this principle in action. They carefully constructed their diplomatic and commercial relationships so that their various allies' interests were aligned or at least non-conflicting. Their partnerships with Byzantine merchants supported their relationships with Ottoman officials, while their financial arrangements with northern European kingdoms complemented their Mediterranean trading agreements. This network coherence made them indispensable to multiple parties simultaneously and created switching costs that extended far beyond any individual relationship. The ultimate objective of Machiavellian alliance building extends beyond personal power or wealth accumulation. The truly sophisticated practitioner seeks to create sustainable systems of mutual benefit that can persist across changing circumstances and evolving personnel. This requires thinking beyond individual relationships to consider the institutional and cultural frameworks that enable long-term cooperation among powerful entities. The most successful alliance builders of history understood that their individual careers were limited, but the systems and precedents they established could create lasting value for their successors and institutions. They invested time and energy in developing models for cooperation that could be replicated and scaled, creating legacies that extended far beyond their personal networks. This institutional perspective requires accepting that the most important successes might not be immediately visible or personally attributed. The creation of new standards for international cooperation, the establishment of precedents for cross-cultural business relationships, or the development of models for sustainable partnership all represent forms of success that transcend individual achievement while ultimately serving individual strategic objectives. The man who destroys his weak self through this comprehensive transformation becomes truly indestructible not because he cannot be challenged or threatened, but because he has eliminated the internal vulnerabilities that allow external pressures to create genuine damage. His security flows from competence rather than position, from network effects rather than individual relationships, from systematic value creation rather than defensive maneuvering. This transformation represents a fundamental shift from scarcity-based thinking to abundance-based thinking. The weak self hoards opportunities, guards information, and approaches relationships as zero-sum competitions. The strong self shares opportunities, provides information generously, and creates positive-sum relationships that benefit all parties. This abundance-based approach ultimately generates far more power and security than any defensive strategy can achieve. The journey from weakness to strength through strategic alliance building requires patience, discipline, and genuine commitment to continuous learning and adaptation. It cannot be accomplished through shortcuts or manipulation, as these approaches inevitably reveal themselves to experienced evaluators and destroy the trust necessary for sustained cooperation. Instead, it demands authentic personal development aligned with strategic relationship objectives. The rewards of this transformation extend far beyond professional or financial success. The individual who masters the art of creating genuine value for powerful allies while systematically eliminating personal weaknesses develops capabilities and perspectives that enhance every aspect of life. The confidence that comes from proven competence, the security that flows from diversified networks, and the satisfaction derived from complex strategic success create a foundation for sustained happiness that transcends any specific achievement or relationship. Thus, the 13 principles of Machiavellian alliance building serve not merely as tactical guidance for professional advancement, but as a comprehensive framework for personal transformation. The weak self that seeks external validation, fears scarcity, and approaches relationships defensively must be systematically dismantled and replaced with strength rooted in competence, abundance, and genuine service to others. This transformation makes one truly indestructible not because external threats disappear, but because internal strength makes those threats irrelevant to one's continued success and satisfaction. The path forward requires beginning immediately with available opportunities while maintaining focus on the longer-term transformation necessary for sustained success. Each interaction becomes practice for more sophisticated alliance building, each challenge becomes an opportunity to eliminate weakness and develop strength, each success becomes a foundation for greater achievements. The individual who commits to this path with genuine dedication will find that the journey itself provides rewards that justify the effort, while the destination offers security and influence that surpass most people's highest aspirations. In the end, the greatest alliance one can form is with one's own transformed self, powerful, competent, generous, and unshakable in the face of a world that constantly tests the strength of all relationships and the authenticity of all claims to power. From this foundation, all other alliances become possible, profitable, and permanent in ways that those who have not completed this inner work can never achieve or understand.